you ran into him. Okay.
Got the first time.
Do you need an ambulance?
Yeah, no, I need the cops.
Okay.
Hey humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, I do videos on creepy and disturbing things. And today we are going down this deep dive rabbit hole of the disappearance of Brandon Lawson. Real quick, before we get into today's video, this video actually does have a sponsorship, so let's do that real quick. Thank you so much to June's Journey for sponsoring this portion of today's video. June's Journey is a mobile app game where you get to find hidden objects in super aesthetic and colorful scenes. The best part is that it's completely free to download onto your device. I personally love playing the game after I'm done working for the day. It's just so relaxing. It's not a stressful game at all. It's just one of those games that you play when you want to escape from the world for a little bit. But at the same time, as you solve the hidden object scenes, you're also following along with a murder mystery story set in the 1920s that gets solved as the game goes on. So it still like fits my vibe, you know? I also really love how the game can actually be pretty challenging at times, but not so much that it gets frustrating or anything, just enough so you feel like you're actually getting some good brain stimulation while you're playing. The scenes though, as you're playing, are just so detailed and so colorful and beautiful to look at that it's just like a pleasant game all around. I've been pretty obsessed with it and I've been playing it a lot. It gets very addicting, but like in the best possible way. Download June's Journey for free by clicking the link below in the description. June's Journey is available on Android and iOS mobile devices, as well as on PC through Facebook Games. Thank you again so much to June's Journey for sponsoring today's video. Okay, let's get into the story of Brandon Lawson. Brandon has been missing since August 9th, 2013. And frankly, the circumstances surrounding his disappearance are completely baffling. As of this filming anyway, there have been absolutely no signs of Brandon since he disappeared. That means not his clothes, his wallet, his keys, nothing on him, none of his remains, nothing has ever been found. A quick note about sources for this video. So I did do regular research of just reading articles and, you know, miscellaneous things that I found on the internet. However, I also listened to interviews with a family friend, Kyle, the brother, and Brandon's ex-wife, I guess, or ex-girlfriend. They were partners when he was around. And I got a lot of information directly from them on this podcast. The podcast is called Crawlspace, and they also did a deep dive on Maura Murray, so I actually really recommend it. I'll have everything linked down below if you want to check out any of the sources. But I just wanted to say that because a lot of these like very specific details are accounts from them. So I thought that was a really interesting thing to include so that we can get a really good idea of everything that happened, at least that we know of. All right. All the chaos started on the night of August 8th, 2013. Brandon arrives home very late that night to his home that he shares with his long-term girlfriend, Ledessa Lofton. The two met and started dating when they were only teenagers, and 3 children together, and 10 years later, they were not only in love, but they were best friends. When Brandon disappeared, Ledessa was 25 years old and Brandon was 26. Brandon also had a 4th child from a previous relationship. That's not very important to the story, but just something to note. And to this day, Ledessa considers that child as one of her own. So anyway, Brandon returns to his home in San Angelo, Texas. Around 10:45 to 11 p.m., somewhere in there, Ledessa and Brandon had an argument. According to Ledessa herself, her firsthand account, they were having an argument about Brandon possibly being on drugs. Essentially just because Ledessa did not want him around the children, because all the children were pretty young at this point still, didn't want him around them if he was. And Ledessa does admit in this interview that Brandon was technically an addict, but he didn't like do it every single day. He wasn't the type that was like, I mean, he wasn't away from home every single day doing this. He'd be like a once in a while type person, or go a few months at a time and then stop for a few months at a time, like that kind of thing. So it wasn't like he was consistently doing this illegal activity. And he had been clean for 6 months before all this went down, but Ledessa still maintains that she personally thinks he was intoxicated somehow on this night. About 11:30 p.m. that night, Brandon calls his father, who lives in Crawley, Texas, which was about a 3-hour drive away from where they lived. He let his dad know that he was coming to visit. I think he and Ledessa just kind of needed a break from each other to cool off, and Ledessa, by all accounts, did not want him around the children for the stuff that we just talked about. At 11:54 p.m., Brandon leaves the house in San Angelo in his silver Ford F-150 truck. It's also important to note here that Ledessa did not have a cell phone charger. One of their kids, at least I think the story is that one of her kids had broken it while they were playing with it, and so she didn't have another one, so she could not get to her phone. She had to put her phone in their car out in the driveway in order to charge it. And so even if Brandon was trying to call her, as we'll talk about later, she wasn't able to get these calls. Okay, so back to Brandon. He gets on Highway 277, headed north out of San Angelo. Between San Angelo and Bront, side note, I know it looks like it should be pronounced Bronte, but I have heard every Texan calls it Bront, just like one syllable. So I'm going to call it Bront because it seems like the locals call it that. However, I'm sure some people pronounce it Bronte. It wouldn't matter if the pronunciation police didn't come at me in the comments like every single video. So, okay. Right before reaching Bront, his truck ran out of gas. It's about 12:30 a.m. at this point. So it's now the early morning hours of August 9th. These are also like very small towns with small populations. It's not like there's gas stations everywhere. Like me and a lot of you who live near cities or in the city, there's a gas station on like every corner, like Starbucks. And in this kind of area where he was driving, there wasn't just like a gas station to go to nearby. He probably thought he could make it to the next town without getting gas. So Brandon is kind of stuck. So from this point until 1:30 a.m., whatever happened to Brandon that night, this is when it happened. It's muddled and there's a lot of pieces missing for everybody, his friends and families included, but we're gonna go over as much as we can and see if we can make it as clear as possible. Brandon calls his brother Kyle Lawson for help after he runs out of gas. Kyle claims that during this first call, Brandon told him that, quote, 3 of the Mexicans in the neighborhood are chasing me out of town. Kyle asked Brandon at this point if it's possible he was hallucinating, but Brandon denied it. But according to Kyle, there was no quote-unquote Mexicans in their neighborhood at all. He also told Kyle on that call that he ran out of gas and he needed help. He needed to come bring him gas. So Kyle, his wife, and his 4-year-old child all get in the car and head to where Brandon said he was. They don't have a gas can though, so first they do go to Brandon's house where Ledessa left a empty gas can out on the porch for them to take so that they could take it to Brandon. Ledessa, nobody thinks anything's wrong at this point. Nobody knows that he's in trouble. They think that he's just heading towards his dad's house and he ran out of gas. So Kyle is just taking care of it and Ledessa stayed there and took care of the children. For the next 20 minutes after this, Brandon and Kyle kept trying to call each other, but they couldn't stay connected for whatever reason. Brandon would sometimes hung up after saying like a sentence or two, and then other times it would just get disconnected. At 12:50 a.m., Brandon makes his first call to 911. It is hard to understand to this day. We don't know, nobody knows exactly what he was trying to say on the 911 call, but we will listen to it and then we will break it down from what we know was said and things that we're pretty sure was said, some speculation, but we'll analyze it. So here's the 911 call.
9/2013 0:50 and 38 seconds.
911 emergency.
Yes, I'm in the middle of the field. It's like we're just cruising guys over. Right here going towards Javelin on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. Got chasing to the woods. Please hurry.
Okay, now run that by me.
I'm not talking to him. I actually ran into him.
Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
Got the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance?
Yeah. No, I need the cops.
Okay. Is anybody hurt? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Important to note about this 911 call. First of all, this was not a trained 911 dispatcher taking these calls. For whatever reason, calls were being fielded through a nursing home in this town. I don't know why. I didn't even know this was a thing. I think it's just because the town was so small that they didn't have the staff for it. So 911 calls were being like fielded through a nursing home, and this worker picked up and answered Brandon's call. That's why the 911 dispatcher is like not as doesn't say all the normal things that they say. Here are the things that we absolutely know Brandon said on the call. 1, he told the operator that he ran out of gas. 2, at some point during the call, he said that he needed the cops. 3, he told the dispatcher that he was being chased into the woods. Another important note. So as we look at the terrain around the area he was last seen, I'll try to include a picture here. It's also does not really look like what we think of as the woods, like the forest, but confirmed on this podcast I was listening to, a lot of Texans refer to a wide range of things as the woods. So it's just like, I mean, it's deserty, there's like brush and there's animals and there's, you know, I think like different types of bushes and everything, and there's some trees, but it's not like thick, dense forest when we think of the woods, but they just refer to it as that in Texas. The area was also known to be populated with rattlesnakes and wild boar, which we'll talk about that later. We know that he also said, "Please hurry," on the call. So here are parts of the call that we think we can deduce that gives us some clues, but we are not positive. We do hear a sound at one point on the call in the background, which some believe could be a gunshot sound.
The first
Do you need an ambulance?
But Kyle, the brother, and others believe that it's not a gunshot at all. It's just the traffic going overhead on the bridge nearby. It sounds like normal traffic sounds to me. I don't personally think it sounds like a gunshot, but of course, nobody knows. He says something along the lines of, "We're out here going towards Abilene on both sides."
Right here going towards Abilene on both sides.
Abilene is the next town after Bront. And yeah, that's the same direction that Brandon had been heading. Of course, nobody knows exactly what he was trying to say by this. There is some sort of clue. He does say we're heading, as in there's more than one person there or somebody else is with him. And then we also can totally speculate, maybe it's a 2-lane highway, 1 lane going north, 1 lane going south. Is it possible that somebody had been like stalking him or got mad and pulled up behind him and then pulled up next to him on the other lane or something? Him saying he was being chased into the woods again signals that somebody else was with him.
There's one car here that got chased into the woods. Please hurry.
He also, during the call, possibly says something like, "I got the first guy," again implying that he wasn't alone.
Got the first guy.
And then we also speculate, is it possible that Brandon was on speakerphone? By the way, the volume and the audio changes throughout the call. Is it possible he had the phone like down here and he's looking behind him and the other way in his rear view mirror or in his windows or something while he's driving? And so that's why the audio sounds so weird and comes in and out so much. Or is it possible that this is because he's not in the truck at all, but is he like running and he's on the ground running? And that's why it's so hard to not only understand him, but why the audio is odd. Between this time and 1:15 a.m., so for the next 25 minutes, Brandon is trying to make phone calls to not only Kyle, but 911 again, LaDessa, and even his neighbor. A lot of the calls were going to voicemail, but they believe that his phone was still on at this point. And then another 911 call was made completely separately from Brandon, but a trucker driving on this road actually called 911 to report his truck there because his truck was like over the line and it was parked in this really hazardous way because he ran out of gas. So this trucker also calls 911. And then finally at 1:19 a.m., all of Brandon's calls start going straight to voicemail. During all these calls, just shortly after 1 a.m., the deputy arrives at Brandon's truck, Deputy Neal, after getting word of the 911 call from the trucker. So at this point, we don't believe that Deputy Neal knew that Brandon had called 911 at all. He was responding to a totally separate call. But Brandon was already gone by this time. Kyle arrived at 1:10 a.m., so they arrived right about the same time. This is also a very important part of the story. So Kyle was on the phone with Brandon when he pulled up to his truck, and Brandon was gone, at this point likely hiding in the bush. We think this because he told Kyle on the phone that he could see him and he could see the officer, but neither the officer or Kyle could see Brandon. Kyle also did not tell Deputy Neal that he was on the phone with Brandon when he pulled up. This led to not only the police department, but the public to be very suspicious and nasty towards Kyle, thinking that Kyle either had something to do with Brandon's disappearance or Kyle had something to do with driving him somewhere to help him get away and wasn't fessing up to what really happened. However, this is highly unlikely to be the case. Kyle, remember, at this point, did not know that Brandon had already called 911. He didn't know Brandon was in any danger. Brandon had a warrant out for his arrest at this time. As far as we know, they weren't actively after him. It was a non-violent, likely drug-related charge. So because it was a non-violent charge like this, Kyle was not about to snitch on his brother and tell the cop he was on the phone with him in case Brandon wanted to dodge the police officer. So again, let me reiterate that. Kyle thought that Brandon was fine at this point, didn't know he called 911 for help, so he was simply protecting his brother from being arrested. I personally don't blame him for this at all, and it makes perfect sense. I am a super goody two-shoes, and I don't think I would even snitch out one of my friends or family if they had some non-violent charge. As long as it was something non-violent, I wouldn't just hand them to the police. We later also found out that Brandon was not concerned about the warrant. Obviously he wasn't, because he wouldn't have called 911 if he was. But Brandon had also done time before, and he was planning on dealing with this warrant soon. He had just found out about it. He didn't even know about it until very recently. He didn't mind doing his time in order to take care of it, and he had, by all accounts, planned to do so. Here is the last contact that anybody had with Kyle that we know of. At 1:18 a.m., remember his phone started going straight to voicemail around 1:19 a.m., Kyle's partner waiting in the car with their 4-year-old child got through to Brandon. She said that Brandon told her not only was he bleeding, but he sounded really, really out of breath. Kyle says that he talked to Brandon just one more time after this. Brandon allegedly told him, quote, "one time run," which, if you don't know, because I didn't and most people wouldn't, was code, at least in their world, was code for "there's the police, run." But Kyle was confused and was like, "Bro, I have no reason to run from the cops. I'm not gonna do that." And Brandon tells him, "Where's your pride, motherfucker?" and hangs up on him, and Kyle never hears from his brother again. Kyle said in his interview that he thought of this just as why wouldn't you run from the cops when I tell you to run from the cops? But it all does not add up. It doesn't make any sense, because why would he tell his brother to run from the cops when he had just called 911 for the cops? Unless that had something to do with the deputy that was there. Kyle talks to the officer for a few minutes, but then he drives up the road with his family so he could be away from the deputy. Again, he didn't know at this point that Brandon had called the police. So he thought maybe Brandon was hiding, and if Kyle was away from the police, then Brandon would show himself. He searched for around 30 to 45 minutes up this road, but eventually left when nothing came of it. Kyle had filled this gas can with gas at this point, and he left it in the back of Brandon's truck so that when he returned to the truck, he could fill it with gas and make it to the next town. But Kyle had gone on to search for hours after this happened, looking for Brandon, couldn't find him, returned to the truck around 5 a.m., and the truck was exactly where he left it. The police then had the truck towed around 8 to 9 a.m. that morning, the morning of the 9th. They found no drugs in the car, no paraphernalia in the car. The truck was not damaged at all. There was no signs of a struggle, but To be fair, they also did not do an official search on the truck. They didn't check for forensic evidence, they didn't check for fingerprints or anything like that. So I want to talk about this for just a moment, the police and the police station. In my opinion, the police department involved in this really dropped the ball on Brandon's case. So according to Ledessa, remember how I said that Brandon also called the neighbor that night? Well, she went to the neighbor and asked if he would come to the police station with her to give them, tell them everything that he knew and everything Brandon said to him. They went to the police station and the police were like, we don't need to talk to him. Which Ledessa, of course, found not only frustrating, but just really, really weird. Why would they not want to know the last words that Brandon said to somebody else? I mean, it could be a very important clue to what happened to him. The cops would then just continually tell the family that they believe Brandon ran off on his own accord, even implying that perhaps he just ran away with some other woman. And it was just very clear that the police didn't think much of Brandon. They thought that he was just some drug junkie that ran away or got himself killed, which I just have to say, I think that's really unfair. I don't care if you're an addict, I don't even care if you're that good of a person. I don't think there's very few people that deserve to have something like this happen to them and not get any closure for it. Brandon deserves to be found. His family deserves to know what happened to him. And drugs, not only do they not make you a bad person, but by all accounts, he wasn't a bad person. Ledessa and other family members stressed that Brandon was a really good person who cared a ton about his children. Just because you're not perfect doesn't mean that you don't deserve justice and closure and to be found. That drives me nuts. And then there's Deputy Neal, the officer that came to the scene that night. According to Ledessa herself, Officer Neal doesn't really like her and doesn't really like their family. Kyle even speculates in his interview that Deputy Neal might have had something to do with this, or might at least know what happened to Brandon. And so the department as a whole knows this, and so they're covering for him and pushing the family away and trying to just keep this case under wraps because it had something to do with one of their officers. Of course, obviously that's complete speculation. There is absolutely zero evidence to prove or to support the fact that Deputy Neal had anything to do with harming Brandon or his disappearance. But Ledessa says that she doesn't like this bad relationship that her family has with the police. All she wants is for Brandon to be found. That's literally all she wants. And she'd be happy to put any of these differences aside and thinks that the family and the police should just be working together no matter what. She has even said that she wishes at this point that it was another woman that he ran off with. At least in that case, at least he'd be safe and at least her children would still have their father. So the family did, of course, search for Brandon extensively. Like I said, so Ledessa wasn't searching that night, and people are mean to her about that too. But again, the reason's pretty understandable. She ended up getting ready for bed. She had 3 children at home. One of them was sick, and so she couldn't just go out easily. She didn't even know anything was wrong for hours because after she fell asleep, she woke up feeling like something was wrong. So she went out to the car. Like we talked about earlier, she didn't have a charger, so her phone was charging in the car, and then she saw all these missed calls and messages from not only Brandon, but others. But to this day, she has been working adamantly to continue to get justice for Brandon. But they had walking ground searches, they had cadaver dog searches, they had helicopter searches, police aerial searches, but still no sign of Brandon has ever been found. And there is this rumor, I can't 100% confirm that this is true or not, but that the wild boar in the area would have thrown off the scent of the cadaver dogs. And so even if his body was out there, the cadaver dogs might not have been able to find it because of the scent of these boars. So let's go over the theories. Did Brandon run away? Not likely. He and Ledessa were fighting that night, so that could be one clue to lead that why he might want to run away. He also withdrew money from his 401k the day of his disappearance. The money was deposited into his account, but Brandon has never touched the account. He never got any cash out of the bank. So against this theory, why would he have called all his family and friends and the police to come and help him if he was trying to run away? He also was supposed to start a new job soon. He had a new job all lined up. Why would he have done that if he was going to run away? Like Ledessa said, she wishes this was the case because she believes that he would have been found by now or tracked down by now, and then he could at least come back and take care of their children. Another possible theory that we have is, was he a victim to an animal attack? Again, all of these theories, of course, are complete speculation, but that area is known for rattlesnakes and wild boar. Wild pigs can be super hostile, and groups of them, or I think even one of them, could attack a human and potentially kill them if provoked enough or they feel, threatened enough. So did they attack him, but Brandon got away at first and was trying to get away when he was calling all these people, but they were too strong for him. They came back and attacked him as he was running away, and then he died that way. Wild boar would eat human remains, so it would be hard to find any trace of him, but you think that they wouldn't eat his clothes, his phone, his keys, his wallet. You'd think if that were the case, we would have found some other sign of him somewhere. Also, if this was the case and he was that close to his truck, why would he run away? If he was being attacked by an animal, wouldn't your first instinct be try to get back in the car so that he would have shelter from them? Again, I wasn't there. If this was the case, you could have just panicked and ran away, so it's possible, but you'd think that your first instinct would be to get back into the little shelter you have. A popular theory was he a victim of foul play. His 911 call, for example, has a couple clues in it that suggest that maybe he was being chased by somebody else or a group of somebodies. He also said on the phone at one point to Kyle's girlfriend that he was bleeding. Was it possibly some sort of drug deal that he was relapsing, so he went out to do a deal and it went terribly wrong? This would be the most likely scenario in terms of them not finding any trace of him, because if it was some sort of gang or something like that and it went wrong, they'd probably have the means to completely disappear a person. However, there was nothing suspicious on his cell phone records to suggest that he was going to meet anybody or that he had any known enemies. According to all his family and friends, he had no enemies that they knew of. So the most likely way this is possible is if he ran out of gas and he got into some sort of altercation or confrontation with someone or a group of people after he was stranded on the side of the road. But even that, if that were the case, they would have had to work very fast to get him, harm him and get him completely out of the area in just that short amount of time, especially with no witnesses driving by. Possible, but again, just seems unlikely, but I could see how this theory was at least part of what happened to him. And then, of course, the theory we're all thinking of was this entire thing due to him being on drugs. Longtime friend of Brandon and the family advocate, Jason Watts, in his interview, he is convinced Brandon was completely sober and had not relapsed whatsoever. But both his longtime girlfriend and his brother, people very close to him that talked to him that night, both thought that he was. Some of the nonsensical things he was saying, and then thinking he was being chased, when if you listen to the 911 call and that was just traffic, it's possible he was completely alone and he was having some sort of paranoid delusions or hallucinations. I mean, did he imagine or see a hallucination of somebody chasing him and he ended up not being really in touch with reality and then he ended up drowning in a nearby river or something like that? Again, it seems unlikely that they wouldn't have found any trace of him if that were the case. It seems like they would have had some clues by now, but it is possible. Again, I have to say this for legal reasons, but of course this is 100% speculation. Take it with a grain of salt. It's just my personal opinion. I think it was a combination of these two. I do believe that he likely was not sober and that he might have ran into foul play. Maybe not being sober made him get into some sort of confrontation with a group of people. Maybe his truck being in partially in the middle of the road made some group of people or a person angry because they had to swerve around him, so they stopped. and got out of the car and took him away or something like that. The reason, I mean, part of this, Ledessa said that the last official cell phone ping of Brandon was 3 miles away from where his truck was, and that area had not been searched yet. So if somebody had abducted him, like if the altercation was happening at the truck when he was calling 911 and calling all his friends, and then that person somehow subdued and abducted him, they would have thrown his phone out the window a few miles away, right? Again, total speculation, but that seems like the most likely scenario to me. If it was just Brandon by himself, I just don't see how there's no sign of him that would have been found by now. That's just the part that really bothers me, that I don't think it was just him, you know, due to what his state of mind. There's just so many questions unanswered, and I feel like someone somewhere in the world must know something. So wanted to share this out. And of course, I will put his information on the screen. There's of course photos throughout this video, but you can call the Texas Department of Public Safety at 512-424-5074. You can call Coke County Sheriff's Office at 325-453-2717. You can call Crime Stoppers, or you can message the Facebook group called Help Find Brandon Lawson if you or anyone you know lives in that area or may have any sort of tips to help with this case. Thank you so much to my patrons on the screen right now, but especially to my highest tier patrons, Colin Holmes, Deck of Cards, Creep Me Out, Alice Paul, Ryan Fenton II, Samantha RG08, Michelle Valdovinos, and Tom L. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave this video a like just to help the channel out, and I will see you all in the next one.